It happened on one of those Saturdays where you plan to be out for just a couple of hours, but somehow you end up getting home late, exhausted, hungry, and with no clear idea of where the day even went. I was trying to find a warehouse. A buddy had asked me to swing by and check out some leftover materials that might be useful for a cabin project. He texted the location and said, "It's simple, you won't get lost." Sure thing. I left after lunch, punched the address into Google Maps, and everything seemed fine until I got into the industrial zone. You know the type. Big gray buildings, cracked asphalt lots, weird side roads, and zero signs on anything. And then the GPS just lost its mind. Started looping me around, sending me down dead ends, pointing me toward random abandoned loading docks. I tried restarting the route, turning around. Nothing helped. I called my friend. No answer. Finally, I gave up and decided to head back toward the highway and just go home. By the time I got out of that maze, the sun was setting. I got home completely drained, like I'd spent the day hauling bricks instead of driving. The house was quiet. My wife was in the kitchen. The kids were at their grandma's. I tossed my jacket over a chair and collapsed onto the couch. I had just started to stretch out when my phone buzzed from the windowsill. My wife was passing by, so I asked without thinking, "Hey, Sarah, can you check who that is? I'm too tired to get up." She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and then pause. I didn't notice it at first, just silence. Then she looked up and very calmly, almost flatly, read aloud, "Tell us about your experience at Ocean Breeze Spa." That's when I realized the day wasn't quite over yet. "What's that?" she asked, same calm tone. But I knew that tone. That tone's more dangerous than yelling. What spa?" I said, sitting up as if I could hear better from a different position. She silently turned the screen toward me. It was a notification from Google, a request to leave a review. Ocean Breeze Spa. Of course. Looked like I'd spent the afternoon relaxing at a day spa instead of chasing scrap wood across a junkyard. I started explaining. It had to be a mistake. I told her I'd been lost in the industrial district, that the GPS probably logged my location, and maybe this spa was just next to the warehouse I'd been circling. I hadn't even seen a spa. Just fences, concrete, pipes. Who puts a spa there? But the more I explained, the dumber it all sounded. I mean, seriously, I was in the middle of nowhere looking for a warehouse, and somehow a spa was next door, and my phone thought I went in? I didn't even believe it myself. She just stared at me, and that silence was worse than any argument. "So you went to a spa?" she finally asked. "No, I didn't even see the place. You know me." "Well," she said, turning back toward the kitchen, "now I'm not so sure." And off she went, with my phone. I just sat there in the hallway, half out of my jacket, still wearing my shoes, feeling this weird guilt, like I had snuck off to steam and sip beer while she was home making dinner. We barely talked that evening. Dinner was quiet and cold, and I slept on the couch. The next day, I went full detective mode, dug up the address, cross-checked it on maps, zoomed in on the satellite view. Sure enough, the spa was literally next door to that warehouse. Like, wall to wall. Took screenshots, printed them out like some kind of courtroom exhibit, and showed her. She looked, sighed, and just said, "Still weird how these kinds of coincidences only ever happen to you." So yeah, good luck trusting GPS after that.
Life in the suburbs isn't just about cozy houses, picket fences, and morning coffee on the porch. It also comes with an ever-watchful eye in the form of your neighbors, especially if one of them happens to be an energetic, nosy, and self-appointed moral authority like Mrs. Johnson, the kind of woman who knows everything, even things that didn't happen. It all started simply enough. I was at home while my husband was at work, as usual. I ordered a few things online, summer dresses, t-shirts, nothing major. The delivery driver pulled up, rang the doorbell, and I stepped out, grabbed my package, thanked him, and went back inside. That was it. But we live in a quiet part of Austin where houses face each other across sleepy streets. Apparently, any car parked near my driveway is grounds for a neighborhood investigation. That evening, my husband came home wearing a mysterious smile. Sitting at the kitchen table, he looked at me like he knew something I didn't. "What's up?" I asked. "Oh, I know," he said smugly. "Know what?" I asked, starting to feel uneasy. "The neighbors told me." It turned out Mrs. Johnson had stopped him on his way home. She's an elderly woman with a piercing gaze and a firm belief that her duty is to safeguard the moral fabric of our block. She flagged him down and said, "Do you know what your wife's been up to while you're at work?" "Excuse me?" he asked, confused. "Oh yes," she said. "Men. Coming and going. Yesterday, a man in a white car dropped something off, stayed for half an hour, and then left. That's all I'm saying." My husband burst out laughing. Thankfully, he's fully aware of my online shopping habits and even appreciates that I don't drag him to stores. But the story didn't end there. A couple of weeks went by and I continued living my life, placing orders, receiving deliveries. Yet, the air around me grew colder. One neighbor, who used to wave and smile, now avoided eye contact and pressed her lips into a tight line. Another walked past me like I had Scarlet Woman emblazoned across my forehead. The real climax came yesterday. I stepped outside. Autumn was settling in and it was time to cover the flower beds. As I bent over the garden, I heard that familiar voice. "Good morning," said Mrs. Johnson. I straightened up. "Good morning," I replied. "Getting your flowers ready for the cold? Smart girl?" I nodded. "You know, you seem to have a lot of visitors lately," she said, her tone laced with implication. I switched to my clueless and cheerful mode. "Oh, no visitors here," I said. "Really? Then what about all those cars?" "Oh, those are just delivery drivers," I explained. Her eyes lit up as if she'd caught me in a lie. "Does your husband know about these delivery drivers?" With the straightest face I could manage, I said, "Of course he does. He's the one who gives me the money." She nearly choked on her indignation. "Well, I never," she gasped, "and why would I waste time driving to the mall when people can just bring things to me?" I added, "Convenient, isn't it?" She huffed, her voice rising. "And you enjoy it, I'm sure." "Very much," I said seriously. "Yesterday, they brought me a pair of shoes. Fit perfectly." "You shameless hussy," she exclaimed, throwing her hands in the air. "I'll tell your husband. I'll report this to the HOA." I almost told her that my husband is the HOA president, but held back. This morning, my mom called, her voice careful, almost apologetic. "Honey, is there something you'd like to tell me?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, there are rumors going around that you, have men visiting. Frequently." I sighed, sat down, and thought to myself, there's no clearing my name now. Even if I walked around wearing a shirt that said, "I just love online shopping," it wouldn't help. No one bothers to ask, clarify, or talk. Gossip spreads like wildfire, quick, smoky, and impossible to contain. Fine. I'll be that woman. The one with visitors. But there's no fun in it. No secret affairs or romantic rendezvous. Just dresses, boxes, and delivery drivers. Still, you know what? Next time I'll order something huge. Let them bring it in a moving truck and unload it right in front of my house. Let's see how Mrs. Johnson handles that.
Mornings always start the same. Cinnamon coffee in a travel mug, a half-awake drive on autopilot, out of the driveway, onto the loop, into the downtown parking garage. Lights on in the office, a few clicks, and the screen fills with spreadsheets, emails to DOS. I'm 38, old enough to not chase approval, young enough to still feel every heartbeat. Middle management, not an executive, but not some guy fetching coffee either. My team respects me. My boss leaves me be. I look the part, pressed shirt, clean haircut, polished shoes, a quiet wristwatch. I know how to listen without interrupting, how to crack the right joke at the right time. I don't preach. I don't overshare. I'm married. Not perfectly, but married. 15 years now. My wife. She's like that old playlist you keep in your car. You know every note, every lyric, even the ones that annoy you. There are things that still make me respect her. There are things that drive me crazy. Sometimes it's warm, sometimes it's distant. Sometimes we don't speak for a day, then argue, then suddenly laugh at something dumb in the kitchen. That's marriage. Real marriage. No Instagram gloss, just two people with a shared world, kids, a home, a past. You don't just drag and drop that into the trash. And in this world, there's me, a guy who hears people whisper behind his back, "You, still faithful? Why? You're a good-looking guy, successful. What's the deal?" They say I could have a line out the door. Women smile, flirt, sometimes linger in conversation a little too long, but no one ever crosses the line, and I don't invite them to. One of the women in my department is Rachel. She's 30, sharp, heels every day, always has a comment that makes the room laugh. The office lights up around her. Sometimes she jokes with a twist. Sometimes she bends just a little lower for a folder. If I were 25, I probably would have fallen. Now, I just smile back. The other day she said, "You're always so decent. Guys like you don't exist." I shrugged. They do. You're just not looking in the right places. My coworker Kevin has that permanent smirk. Come on, man. Every guy's got issues at home. You fix that stuff on the side. That's how it works. He doesn't know I've got issues too. Evenings where my wife and I sit across from each other and the kitchen table feels like the Atlantic Ocean, where everything about me seems to irritate her. The way I chew, the way I scroll, the way I breathe. And her? She drives me up the wall with the way she clicks the remote, the way she says figures under her breath, the way her eyes roll like it's a tick. But I don't leave. I don't go looking for a second act for my soul. You know why? Because cheating isn't about sex. It's about betrayal. It's knowing you're walking out the door planning to lie. It's the moment your gaze changes, when your thoughts are no longer where they should be. One night becomes a snowball, and suddenly you're standing in the hallway, eyes to the floor, saying, "I didn't mean to. I don't know how it happened." But I know. You always know. It's easy to blame the other person when a marriage starts unraveling. She's cold. She's tired. She doesn't notice me. She doesn't inspire me. But let's be honest, I'm no saint either. I'm not always kind, not always patient, not always the first to say sorry. I've got my flaws. I just believe that if you said I'm in, then stay in, or leave like a man. But sneaking around? That's not about passion, that's about weakness. Tonight we're at the kitchen table. Her eyes look heavy. I sip tea. The TV mumbles in the background, no one really watching. "You stayed late again?" she asks. "Work?" She nods. Then quietly, "Are we okay?" I pause, weigh my words. I don't want to lie. It's not always easy. But I'm here. On purpose. She doesn't say thank you, just looks at me, then stands, goes to the cabinet, and brings out those chocolate chip cookies I like. The ones she only buys when she remembers. We eat in silence. But it's something. It's still something. Sometimes people say, "You just haven't met the right temptation yet." Maybe. Or maybe I've just learned to say no to myself before I start saying yes to trouble. And if you're reading this, looking for a way to justify your own affair, don't blame it on her, or him, or life. That's all you. When you want out, you look for excuses. When you want to stay, you look for ways. I'm just here, living. No drama, no side stories. And somehow that quiet loyalty feels like strength, maybe even love.
California's sun burned into my shoulders, and the air carried the tang of salt water, the sweet scent of sunscreen, and the distant laughter of beachgoers. A gentle tune played near the infinity pool, something light and tropical, with a pop beat underneath. This was not the kind of resort you stumble upon by accident. 5-star luxury, a seafood buffet, waiters dressed in crisp white uniforms, and pristine cleanliness. A place where you escape not only the daily grind, but yourself. I'd been lounging by the pool for days, sipping cold craft beer and worrying about nothing except not getting sunburned before I had to fly home. It was somewhere between my third and fourth pint when I noticed them by the edge of the water. She was blonde, maybe 35, possibly older. Tall, with a well-maintained figure. Clearly someone who took care of herself. Her face had soft features, very all-American, slightly weary but glowing with happiness. He was lean and tanned, with a short beard and dark sunglasses. His eyes, though obscured, seemed intense. When he looked at her, there was so much tenderness that, Even as a lifelong cynic, I felt a pang somewhere inside. They laughed, splashed in the water, and talked in a mix of accented English and something else I couldn't place. She kissed his cheek. He held her by the waist. At some point, I found myself close enough to strike up a conversation, because that's what happens on vacations. "Are you two together?" I asked, without malice or ulterior motives, just out of curiosity. She laughed. "Yes," she said. "We meet here every year, 6 years in a row now." He nodded, adding with an accent, "She is my love, only one, my beloved." I raised an eyebrow and smiled. California's sun, summer, romance, it all fit into a story as cliched as it was warm. "Where do you live?" I asked. "I'm from Michigan," she said. "He lives here in San Diego. He works at the marina, sometimes does boat tours. And me, I don't work? You don't work? And who pays for all this?" I gestured around at the lavish resort. "It's not cheap, you know?" She looked at me calmly, almost defiantly. "My husband, your husband?" I nearly choked on my beer. "So you're married?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I have a son. He's 11. My husband is a good man, hardworking, supportive. We've been together a long time. But," she glanced at the man next to her, "I love him. My Turk." He smiled at her but didn't follow every word. She leaned in and kissed him briefly. I was stunned. A husband, a son, and annual trips to another man across the country? Not for a day or two, but for a whole week, every year for 6 years straight? "Does he know?" I asked finally. "My husband?" She smirked. "No, of course not. He thinks I'm on a girls' trip. Says I deserve it." The Turk watched her with such adoration that it felt as if the world around him disappeared whenever she was near. He couldn't catch all of our conversation, but he understood enough from her tone. He took her hand and pressed it against his chest. She kissed him on the lips. I stepped away, not out of morality, but because the air felt tight, claustrophobic. Not from judgment, but from the sheer weight of it all. Somewhere in Michigan, there's a man who has no idea his wife flies off to San Diego each year to be with someone else. He might be at home making breakfast for their son, completely oblivious that his wife is wrapped in another man's arms by a pool on the Pacific coast. And there I was, sitting by the pool, listening to someone say "I love you" with a thick accent, and realizing the world isn't black and white. It's painted in shades of loyalty, lust, lies, self-deception, and the aching desire to feel alive. Because in her eyes, there was no cruelty, no malice, only longing for something she didn't have at home. I went back to my chair, poured myself another beer, and stretched out under the sun. But one thought wouldn't leave my mind. If your wife, Susan, takes annual girls' trips to San Diego, buddy, you're a fool.
I was 21, barely out of college, still caught between daydreams and deadlines. A tender thing, all heart and hope. Love, especially love at first sight, was my personal myth, a story I kept telling myself. It was a Saturday night, one of those last-minute house parties, thrown together with mismatched wine glasses and fairy lights taped to the ceiling. The apartment smelled of cinnamon candles and leftover pizza. I came straight from a bookstore shift, still in my pale pink sweater, a little frayed at the sleeves, and boots that belonged to someone else 2 sizes ago. I hadn't planned to stay long. That was before I saw him. Daniel. He had that kind of face that made the noise in the room fade. Tall, tousled dark hair, eyes with stories behind them, and a grin like he already knew mine. He was sitting on the windowsill with a half-empty beer, lazily spinning a coin between his fingers. When our eyes met, I swear something shifted in the air, like a needle finding its groove. We talked in the kitchen, where someone had spilled wine on the counter, and no one cared. The fridge hummed. He asked about my favourite books, and actually listened. I told him I hated olives, and he picked them off his slice and handed it to me without breaking eye contact. We shared childhood stories like secrets, laughed until our cheeks hurt. By the time the night faded into dawn, and my phone buzzed with a forgotten alarm, I had a new contact in my phone and butterflies in my stomach that wouldn't quiet down. The next day, he texted, "Still thinking about your laugh." And just like that, it began. Texts turned into voice notes into late-night calls into tangled limbs and shared morning coffee. With Daniel, the days blurred into a dream of closeness, instant, magnetic, terrifying in how easy it all was. It felt like I'd walked into the middle of a movie I never wanted to end. November arrived with early snow and a soft ache of anticipation. By then, Daniel had melted into every corner of my life. My phone felt empty when he wasn't on it. My coat smelled like his cologne. Our routines overlapped so seamlessly that it felt like we'd known each other forever. We took weekend walks to nowhere, just moving, just talking. He once kissed me under the bare branches of a maple tree in the park, while a dog barked in the distance, and an old man played harmonica off-key nearby. I told him about my childhood dream of owning a bookstore in the mountains. He said he'd build it with me. By the end of the month, he invited me to join his friends on a ski trip. I wasn't a skier, barely a snow walker, but I said yes, without hesitation. It felt like stepping deeper into a fairy tale. We drove through winding roads, music on shuffle, his hand resting on my knee as we sang along to The Killers and laughed about nothing. His friends welcomed me with easy smiles and mugs of spiced cider. We shared a tiny cabin that smelled of pine and wet wool. At night, under layers of flannel and thick blankets, he whispered things like, "You're the calm I didn't know I needed." I remember tracing the freckles on his shoulder, wondering how it was possible to feel so much and still hold it all inside. The 5th of January, we returned home, all flushed cheeks and tired limbs, and I was floating. The next morning, he flew out for a work retreat in Egypt. Corporate team building, desert tours, generic hotel breakfasts. He called from the airport, sent me a blurry photo of a camel and said, "Wish you were here." I replied with a selfie in bed, coffee in hand, his hoodie on my shoulders. For the next couple of days, we texted, called, sent each other bad jokes, and sleepy goodnights. And then silence. At first I thought, poor Wi-Fi, jet lag, meetings. But as hours turned into days, anxiety bloomed like frostbite. I called. No answer. I messaged. Nothing. I told myself stories. He lost his charger. He's overwhelmed. He'll call any minute. The minute turned into the longest 3 days of my life. And then he called. His voice was strange, gentle, careful, like someone treading over ice. "We need to talk," he said. I knew. He sat on my couch, eyes downcast, and confessed. There was a woman at the resort. A mistake. One night, a blur of alcohol and bad decisions. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't cry. He just looked. "Sorry. I didn't want to lie to you," he said. "But I also don't know how to live with this." Something broke. Not like a plate smashing, more like a thread snapping somewhere deep. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and dropped my favourite teacup. It shattered. So did I. He left, and I began to unravel. I didn't sleep the night he left. I sat curled on the kitchen floor in my oversized hoodie, his hoodie with the broken porcelain still glittering around me like snowflakes of betrayal. The silence in the apartment had weight. My mind kept replaying his words, over and over, like a scratched record I couldn't stop. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, stiff and sore, the sunrise cutting through the blinds like accusations. I didn't go to work, didn't call anyone. I drank cold tea and stared at the wall for hours. By the second day, I stopped eating. By the third, I stopped getting out of bed. My body began to revolt. Nausea, headaches, then vomiting bile, blood. My body was speaking a language I didn't want to understand. Heartbreak as organ failure. Out of desperation, I called him. My voice shook. "I need help." And he came. Of course he did. He found me pale, curled on the bathroom floor, eyes sunken and lips dry. He didn't hesitate, scooped me into his arms like I weighed nothing, and drove me to the hospital. I remember the sharp scent of antiseptic, the beeping monitors, the tired eyes of the nurse, who kept glancing at him like she recognized this kind of mess. Diagnosis: acute stress, liver inflammation, dehydration. My heartbreak had a medical record. He stayed, Saturday, by my side, held my hand while the IV dripped slowly into my veins, whispered apologies that felt soft but empty, said things like, "I'll never forgive myself," and I believed him, or wanted to. Some broken part of me still craved his closeness, still dreamed of a version of us that hadn't splintered in some Egyptian hotel room. So when he asked, weeks later, if we could try again, start over, I said yes. He brought flowers, made pancakes, left notes on my mirror, and I let myself believe that maybe people do change, that maybe love could heal this. But I never stopped checking his phone when he wasn't looking. The beginning of our new beginning felt like a costume party, where I couldn't take the mask off. Daniel tried, he really did. He sent me playlists titled For Us, left little notes in my coat pockets that said, "You're my always." Sometimes he'd just hold me without speaking, as if touch could erase memory. But memory has sharp edges. I started noticing things. The way he angled his phone away from me when texting, the sudden switch in tone when I walked into the room during his calls. Once, I caught him smiling at a message, and when I asked, he just said, "Work stuff. Trust, once cracked, doesn't break with a bang. It crumbles with whispers." One afternoon, I was looking for an old photo on his laptop. He had asked me to help organize his files. That's when I found it, buried deep in a folder named Temp. A photo. Her, the woman from Egypt. She was sitting poolside in a leopard print bikini, posing like she knew someone was watching. Daniel's name was watermarked at the corner. My hands shook. That cursed pattern, that smug tilt of her head. I closed the laptop. Quietly, methodically, like defusing a bomb. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went into the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and saw a stranger. Someone who wanted to believe. Someone who loved too hard. Someone who was losing herself to someone else's lies. That night, he made pasta, lit candles, played vinyl. I stared at the plate, at the man across the table who had kissed someone else and brought me roses the next day. I wanted to ask, "Do you think I'm stupid?" But instead I said, "I'm tired." He reached for my hand. "We'll get through this." I nodded, but something inside me whispered, "I won't." He came back, not with flowers, not with grand gestures, just with eyes that looked older, and a voice that trembled when he said my name. He told me he couldn't stop thinking about me, that Egypt was the biggest mistake of his life, that he wanted to fix what he broke. I was still hollowed out when he said, "Let's start over." And I said yes. We tried. We tried so hard. We went back to the coffee shops we once loved, watched old movies with the lights off, bought groceries like a couple again. He left me notes in my coat pockets. I tried to smile when I read them. Then came the proposal. In a quiet restaurant, during a rainstorm, he got down on one knee. The other couples clapped. I nodded yes. It felt like watching someone else move my mouth. Everyone said we were perfect, friends cried. My mother bought bridal magazines. But at night, when I lay next to him, I couldn't breathe right. The weight of what happened pressed down on my ribs. I saw her face, imagined it, imagined him with her. The leopard skin blur of betrayal. One afternoon, I was using his laptop to check our honeymoon flights and found the photo. Her, that woman, leaning against a palm tree in a leopard skin bikini, smirking at the lens. I shut the laptop slowly. My fingers trembled. All the air left the room. For days I tried to forget it. I made to-do lists, called florists, smiled for dress fittings, but I cried in the bathroom stall at the bakery tasting. I cried on the subway. I cried brushing my teeth. 3 weeks before the wedding, it all cracked open. He confronted me, said he saw a message I sent to a friend, where I joked about a co-worker's cute smile, said I was just like him. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it all hit me like thunder. I bought the dress, I said. I bought the napkins and the flowers and the fairy lights. I bought the dream, and you're accusing me over a text. He didn't answer. His jaw tightened. My hands were shaking. That night, I packed a suitcase. I put the dress in a storage box. I deleted the Pinterest board. And I did one last thing. I bought a leopard skin bikini. 2 days later, I boarded a flight to Egypt. I watched the sand roll by from the window. I floated in the Red Sea. I stood under the same sun, where he betrayed me. And somewhere between the dunes and the waves, I let him go. For real this time. Egypt was nothing like I'd imagined. Not from his photos, not from the stories. It was hotter, drier, more alive. The streets buzzed with bargaining voices and the scent of cumin. The Red Sea glittered like it was made of glass, and I stood on my hotel balcony wearing that leopard bikini, not because of him, but in spite of him. I didn't come to punish him. I came to reclaim myself. Every day was a quiet victory. I sipped mint tea on rooftop cafes. I wandered through markets. I bought bracelets, spices, postcards I never sent. One morning, I booked a desert tour on a whim. I sat on a camel, sand curling around my ankles like smoke, and for the first time in months, I laughed. Not the brittle kind I used to fake real laughter, born from the gut. Something in me shifted. One night, under a starlit sky, I texted him, "I'm not angry anymore. Thank you for showing me what I deserve. Be well." He never replied. And I was grateful. Some silences are sacred. I stayed for 5 more days. I didn't count calories. I didn't count memories. I let myself be curious again about people, about life, about myself. It was a kind of freedom that felt like growing a second skin, thicker but softer. Back home, my apartment welcomed me with stillness. But this time, the silence wasn't hollow. It was space. For air. For growth. For new dreams. I unpacked slowly, hung the leopard bikini in my closet, started writing again, journals, short stories, bits of poetry, and each word stitched me back together. I didn't need him to finish the story. I was the author all along. 3 years later, I ran into Daniel in a bookstore of all places. He looked older, softer around the eyes. We exchanged polite smiles, a quiet nod, and moved on. No words, no need. Outside, the city pulsed with life. I walked home with a paperback in my bag, coffee in hand, and peace in my chest. Love still came to me, not like lightning anymore, but like sunlight through a window, gentle, warm, earned. Some stories don't end in fireworks. Some end in grace.
I used to think infidelity was something that happened to other people. The weak ones, the irresponsible, those who had long stopped caring, people who didn't value their families. not us, not me and Hannah. Things weren't perfect, no, but we were honest. We'd built something real over the years, raised 3 kids together. I believed that our slightly worn out but sturdy life was built on trust. I met Hannah in college. She studied literature, I was in mechanical engineering. We were a strange match, but it worked. We moved in fast, married even faster, and before we knew it, Noah was born. I was 23, she was 22. He came into this world frail, spending his first month in intensive care. For the next 2 years, we were in and out of hospitals. Hannah was his world. I took extra shifts, night jobs, anything to cover the bills. Then came the twins, Emily and Grace. It felt like everything was settling. No big dreams or beach house fantasies. Just an old Toyota I kept trying to fix, family movie nights, and the sound of the girls giggling in the living room. That was happiness to me. When Hannah told me she was pregnant with our 4th, I didn't flinch. I even smiled. It wasn't planned, sure, but I thought, we'll make it work, just like we always do. The baby was a boy. We named him Caleb. But right away, something felt off. Darker skin, deep brown eyes, a slightly almond shape to his lids. Not like me, not like Hannah. I joked, maybe he got it from my great-grandfather. There's a rumor he had Turkish roots. Hannah laughed too, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Months passed. Caleb grew. He laughed, babbled, crawled into our hearts. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling, as though a stranger had found a place in our home. I hated myself for it. I didn't tell anyone. Not even myself, not really. Until one night I stood over his crib watching him sleep, and this thought crept in. What if he's not mine? No, that's insane. Still, I got a DNA test. Quietly, anonymously. Then lived the next 2 weeks like a ghost. Fixing pipes, grocery runs, homework with the girls. Pretending everything was normal while something sharp scraped at my insides. The results came by email. I opened the file, confused at first by all the charts, markers, percentages. Then my eyes locked on a bold line. Probability of biological relationship, 0%. I stared, frozen. Then I laughed, a dry, cracked sound. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room, scream. But I didn't. I just sat there, in silence. For hours, maybe. I don't remember. That evening I confronted Hannah. The kids were asleep. I showed her the results. She didn't cry, didn't shout. She went pale, lips trembling, and said, I don't know how it happened. I'm sorry. Sorry. For what, stabbing me in the back? Feeding me lies? Letting me raise another man's child as my own? I waited for her to deny it, to name someone, to say it was a mistake, just one time. But nothing. Just that small, broken, I'm sorry. I didn't sleep that night. Just chain smoked in the kitchen, watching a candle flicker beneath the family photo. In the morning, I drove to the garage and stayed there. Should I leave? Kick her out? But what about the kids? About Caleb? How do you tell a child you're not his father? I came home that evening. The kids didn't notice anything. Emily showed me a drawing, our family. Me, Hannah, the kids, Caleb included. At the top she'd written, My family is my fortress. I almost wept. 2 weeks passed. I slept on the couch, talked to the kids, made dinner, did pickups and drop-offs. But Hannah and I, nothing. She didn't try to explain, didn't ask for forgiveness, just waited, like she knew it wasn't hers to ask. One evening, coming home from work, I saw a man leaving our building. He glanced at the apartment numbers. Normally I wouldn't have cared, but then Hannah ran out after him, her face, panicked. The man muttered something, walked away. She stared after him like she was afraid he wouldn't come back. When she saw me standing there, she froze, pale again. I said nothing, just walked past. Later that night, she came to the kitchen, sat across from me, hands shaking. That was him, Caleb's real father. I wasn't even surprised, just stared into the table. She told me it happened 2 years ago, when I was away working on a contract upstate. Her mother was hospitalized. I barely called. Work was crazy. He was a friend from college. Showed up, offered help, stayed around. One thing led to another. Once, maybe more. She wasn't sure. I filed for divorce. No yelling, no drama. Just papers. Hannah didn't fight it. I packed a few things and moved out. The kids stayed with her for now. I still saw them every day. Even Caleb. He ran up to me, called me Dad, and I couldn't bring myself to correct him. A month later, my father called. He didn't know what had happened. Asked how I was. I told him, divorced. There was silence. Then, because of her, I said yes. He sighed like he already knew, then added, "You did what you had to. But remember, being a father isn't just blood, it's heart. Caleb's still a kid. He didn't choose any of this." A few more months passed. Then came a letter. Hannah filed for child support for all 4 kids, including Caleb. I went to court. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, read through the documents. I handed her the DNA results. She paused. "But he's legally your son." I was deceived, I said. I filed to contest paternity. Another round of bureaucracy. Psychologists. Evaluations. Meanwhile, Caleb got sick. Breathing issues. I visited him in the hospital. He was on 4th when he saw me. He cried and reached out. For the first time in months, I hugged him. Hannah stood in the corner, silent, hollow, like someone who'd aged a decade in a season. I didn't know what to feel. How do you erase a child you raised? 6 months passed. I rented a small apartment near the kids' school. Saw them almost daily, Caleb too. The court eventually ruled I wasn't liable for Caleb's support, but I could still visit, my request. Hannah moved in with her parents. We rarely spoke. The kids still saw her. I tried not to hate her. But forgiveness, I'm not there yet. You know, when a family falls apart, it feels like the world is ending. But then through the ashes and pain, you see, life goes on. Kids grow. The sun still rises. And even among the ruins, you can build something new. Not a castle, maybe, but a shelter, and a heart that still has room for warmth.
When I was in law school, I worked part-time as an assistant at a small but reputable law firm. The job wasn't hard. Carry documents, read through case files, sit in on hearings, and learn from the experienced attorneys. I took the internship seriously. I wanted to see how all the theory we were cramming in class actually played out in real life. I found family court cases the most gripping. Real emotion, real stakes, better drama than any stage play. There's one case I'll never forget. On paper, it looked like a routine divorce. The client was a man in his early 40s, tall, calm, well-dressed, polite, but his eyes, they looked worn, like someone who had aged 10 years in a month. He and his wife had 3 children. The oldest was 12, the middle one 7, and the youngest 3. He was a business owner, ran a mid-sized construction company, spoke clearly with no bitterness, said divorce was necessary, it's the right thing to do. At first, it seemed like his wife just wanted to leave quietly, no drama. But it turned out to be more complicated. The man had discovered his wife was cheating, the usual way, found messages by accident. I wasn't snooping, he said, just stumbled upon something and couldn't unsee it. Then I started connecting dots, and everything fell into place. The affair was confirmed. Worse yet, there was a strong chance the youngest child wasn't his. He filed for divorce, wanted to keep it civil, said he was willing to pay child support, split the assets, no court fights, as long as the kids were spared the pain. They didn't ask for any of this, he said quietly. There was no anger in his voice, just a kind of sadness, a sense of acceptance. At first, his wife seemed to agree. But something shifted. Maybe pride, maybe fear he'd go through with a paternity test and drag it into a financial battle. At the next hearing, out of nowhere, her lawyer filed a motion requesting DNA testing. Her request, not his. She stood up in court and said loud and clear, "If you're so sure you've been lied to, then test them all. Go ahead. Maybe you'll be ashamed when you see the truth." She said it with defiance, almost a performance. But beneath that anger, you could hear something else: anxiety. The attorney I worked for glanced at me and shook his head. I didn't understand why at the time. Later I would. The process dragged on. The test was scheduled. In the meantime, it was all just legal procedure. Filings, formal responses, positioning. The husband remained calm, too calm. The wife grew tense, defensive, more aggressive in her tone, as if trying to provoke a reaction, find some weakness. And then, the final hearing. The results were in. The judge opened the folder, flipped through the papers, and paused. For a few seconds, she just sat there staring. I saw something I'd never seen before, a judge completely lose her composure. No emotion in her voice, just stunned stillness. She read out paternity, not established, for any of the 3 children. The room went silent. The man sat perfectly still, hands resting on his knees, head slightly bowed. He didn't move, didn't say a word. And his wife, she said nothing for a moment. Then in a voice so soft it barely reached the mic, like she was talking to a friend in her kitchen, she said, "Well, I thought at least 2 were his. How am I supposed to find their dads now?" The air just froze. No outrage, no breakdown, no shouting, just silence. Somewhere behind us, a clerk dropped a pen. It rolled across the tile floor, the sound cutting through the stillness like a pin in a cathedral. The judge wrapped up the formalities. The session was closed. We stepped out of the courtroom. The man turned to thank the attorney, shook my hand too, then walked away. No hesitation, no looking back. There was no anger on his face, just emptiness, like he had just closed the book on one life and was quietly stepping into another, stripped of illusions. That day, I understood something about the truth. It doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it arrives cold, quiet, and merciless. And it shows up right when you least expect it.